At my grandson's birth, my son threw me out, saying she only wants family. But they had no idea that the moment they shut the door in my face would be the beginning of a chain of events that exposed secrets, lies, betrayals, a hidden past, a carefully planned scheme, a crime they never expected, and a truth so deeply buried that its revelation would destroy everything they thought they knew about their own family and completely change the course of all our lives forever. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. I had been driving for 15 hours, believing I would finally live one of the most important moments of my life. The whole way there, I kept imagining how it would feel to step into the hospital and see my son welcoming me, maybe even relieved that I had come. But the first thing I saw was David's face twisting into panic, like my presence was some kind of problem he didn't know how to solve. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe he was stressed or tired from everything that was going on. I tried to smile, even though my body felt heavy from the long trip. When he asked why I was there, I felt something inside me sink. I stood there confused because I had been invited. Jessica had spoken to me with soft words, kind words, telling me she wanted me close during such an important moment. I had held on to those words during the whole drive, thinking they were sincere. But standing in front of my son, watching him look at me like I should not have come, I started to feel something was very wrong. It wasn't the welcome I expected. It wasn't anything close to what I hoped. When he repeated the question, I explained I had been invited, that Jessica had reached out and told me it would mean a lot if I came. I thought saying this would make everything clearer, maybe even comfort him. Instead, the expression on his face only tightened. He said he didn't know anything about that, and I could see he was uncomfortable. I tried to stay calm, even though my legs felt weak after so many hours on the road. I could feel the exhaustion catching up with me, mixing with disappointment. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding. I reminded myself that people get nervous in hospitals, that emotions run high, and that maybe Jessica hadn't communicated things properly. But when he added that she didn't want anyone from the family there, the words hit me hard. It felt like someone had pushed something heavy onto my chest. I stood still, trying not to let him see how much it hurt. I kept thinking of the message she had sent me, the one that seemed warm and genuine. I wondered if I had read it wrong, or if I had misunderstood her tone. Nothing was making sense anymore. I asked him if he was sure, hoping he would say he had misunderstood her, or that maybe she had changed her mind. But he looked away, avoiding my eyes. And that said more than anything else. I could tell he didn't want to talk about it. I could also tell he didn't want me there, at least not at that moment. The whole situation felt unreal, like I had walked into a place where everyone already knew something except me. I felt my face heating up with embarrassment, even though no one else was around to watch. I tried to explain again that she had invited me, but my words sounded small, like they didn't matter. He insisted that she didn't want anyone from the family present, and I realized arguing would only make things worse. My heart was beating fast, not from the trip, but from the humiliation that kept building inside me. I had come with hope, with the intention of supporting them, and now I felt like an outsider who had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I tried to take a deep breath, but it didn't help much. Even so, I forced myself to stay composed. Breaking down in front of him would only make everything more awkward. I told him I understood, even though I didn't understand anything at all. I said I would go to a hotel, that I didn't want to cause problems. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded distant, like it belonged to someone who had finally given up. He nodded quickly, almost relieved, which added another sting to the moment. I walked back to the car, feeling the weight of the hours I had driven, the hopes I had carried, and the sudden emptiness that came from realizing I wasn't welcome. As I started the engine, my hands shook a little, but I didn't want him to see that. I drove to the nearest hotel, trying to convince myself that things could still improve, that maybe tomorrow everything would be clearer. I held on to that small piece of hope because letting go of it felt too painful after everything I had already endured that day. At the hotel, the exhaustion finally hit me fully. My body felt heavy, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I checked in, went to the room, and sat on the edge of the bed without even taking off my shoes at first. I kept replaying the moment at the hospital over and over again, trying to find something I could have done differently, but nothing made sense. I kept thinking about Jessica's message, the way she had sounded so gentle, almost affectionate, when she asked me to come. I had believed her completely. Now I didn't know if she had lied to me or if something had changed after I was already on the road. I wondered if they had talked about me and if she had pressured David to keep me away. I wondered if I had somehow misread the situation from the beginning. The confusion was almost as strong as the sadness. I felt like I had been pulled into a situation I couldn't understand, one where my feelings didn't matter to anyone involved. The night stretched endlessly. I lay down, but I couldn't rest. I kept picking up my phone, checking for messages, hoping for some explanation or even a simple apology. I wanted to believe that someone would reach out and clear things up. Every time the screen stayed empty, I felt my chest tighten again. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had spent trying to be there for my family, all the times I had imagined moments like this being special instead of painful. I tried to remind myself that tomorrow could be different, that maybe they would come to their senses or at least talk to me. The disappointment was still fresh, but I didn't want to let it destroy everything I had hoped for. So I forced myself to hold on to a small bit of optimism, even though it felt fragile. And still, I spent the whole night checking my phone, trying to understand how something I had looked forward to for so long had turned into such a painful rejection. Even with everything that happened, I kept telling myself that maybe, just maybe, things could change in the morning. When the hospital called me asking about a bill I had never agreed to, I felt a cold shock run through me. I was sitting in my hotel room, still tired and confused from everything that had happened the day before, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered without thinking much, expecting maybe some update or explanation. Instead, the woman on the line spoke in a calm but firm tone, asking how I planned to pay for the delivery charges I had supposedly accepted. At first, I thought she had the wrong number. I even asked her to repeat what she meant because it didn't make sense. She explained that I had signed an electronic authorization taking financial responsibility for the birth. I told her that was impossible, that I had been driving through the desert at that exact time, barely with enough signal to check my messages. I tried to explain slowly, hoping she would realize it was a mistake, but she insisted that the system showed my name, my information, and my signature. Hearing that made my stomach tighten. I knew I had not agreed to anything, and yet someone had made it look like I had. After hanging up, I sat still for a few seconds, trying to understand what was happening. It felt like everything that had confused me before was now turning into something much more serious. The hospital emailed the documents to me, and when I opened them, I stared at the screen for a long time. My name, my address, my personal information were all written there, as if I had filled everything out myself. And at the bottom, there was a signature that was supposed to be mine, except it wasn't. It looked like someone had tried to copy the way I signed my name, but got the details wrong. Seeing that made my chest tighten, not in the emotional way, but in the way someone feels when they realize they've been used. I zoomed in on the signature, studying every line, and the more I looked at it, the more obvious it became that it was fake. I thought about the exact moment they said the signature had been made. I remembered the road, the darkness, the long stretch of empty land around me. There was no way I could have done anything like that while driving hours from the hospital. As the truth settled in, I felt a mix of anger and sadness building inside me. Until that moment, I had thought the worst part was being pushed away, ignored, and made to feel like I wasn't welcome. But now I realized there was something much deeper behind it. Someone had used my information, taken my identity, and placed a financial burden on me without my permission. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a simple mistake. It was deliberate. I kept staring at the documents, thinking about how easy they made it look, like I had willingly agreed to pay for everything. My fingers shook a little as I scrolled through the forms, reading each detail slowly. Everything matched my real information so closely that anyone else would have believed it came from me. The realization that someone close to me had done this on purpose hurt in a different way. It wasn't just rejection, it was manipulation. I felt like pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place, each one showing me a situation more painful than the one before. I decided I couldn't just sit there feeling hurt. I needed to do something. I took screenshots of every document, every signature, every timestamp. I saved copies on my phone, on my laptop, and even emailed them to myself so nothing would be lost. I took photos of the emails from the hospital, highlighting the parts that didn't match my actions or timeline. Then I opened my call history to save the record of the hospital's phone call. I thought carefully about every step, trying to stay focused even though my hands were unsteady. I knew that acting calmly was important if I wanted to protect myself. Once I had everything organized, I began writing down where I had been at the time the signature was supposedly made. I described the road, the lack of phone reception, and the exact hours I had been driving. I knew these details mattered. As I put everything together, the feeling of betrayal only grew stronger. Whoever had done this had counted on me being far away, tired, distracted, and easy to frame. And the thought of being treated this way by someone close made my chest ache. After gathering all the information I could, I contacted the legal department the hospital recommended. I sent them the documents and explained that the signature was falsified. I kept my explanation simple, just the facts, even though my emotions were still messy. They responded quickly, asking for more details, and I answered everything step by step. I told them about my location during the supposed signature time, how I had been driving all night, how there was no chance I could have accessed any electronic form. As I communicated with them, the situation became clearer in my mind. I realized this wasn't an accident or the hospital's mistake. Someone had intentionally used my data. Someone had prepared everything so the hospital would believe I took responsibility for something I had not even been allowed to be part of. The more I explained, the more real the betrayal felt. I kept thinking about the past few days, trying to understand at what point everything had turned into this trap. By the time I finished sharing everything with the legal department, I felt different. The sadness was still there, but something stronger was growing over it. I kept thinking about how someone had looked at me, not as a family member, not as someone who cared deeply, but as an easy target. They had taken advantage of my trust and used it for their own benefit. That realization hit harder than the rejection at the hospital. I wasn't just excluded. I had been deceived in a calculated way. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that staying silent would only make things worse. I was tired and emotionally drained, but I wasn't going to let this pass unnoticed. I had my proof, I had the truth, and I had every intention of defending myself. No matter how painful all of it was, I knew one thing for sure. Someone close had decided to turn me into the perfect target, and I would not stay quiet, not after everything I had discovered. Not long after I filed the report, the police contacted me and asked me to come in so they could hear my version of the events. I felt nervous, but I knew I needed to face everything directly. When I arrived at the station, an officer guided me to a small room where a detective was waiting. He asked me to sit down, and I could tell he wanted to understand the whole situation step by step. I started from the beginning, explaining how Jessica had invited me, how her message had sounded sincere, and how I had believed her words without thinking twice. Then I told him about the long drive, the hours on the road, and how tired I was when I reached the hospital. I described the moment I saw David's face filled with panic and confusion, and how I instantly felt something was wrong. I explained how everything escalated when the hospital later called me, accusing me of accepting financial responsibility for something I never signed. As I spoke, the detective wrote everything down carefully. It felt strange repeating all of it to someone who didn't know me, but I wanted him to see the full picture. He asked for proof, and I showed him everything I had gathered. I opened my phone and scrolled through the messages Jessica had sent me, showing the exact words she used when she invited me. Then I showed him screenshots of the hospital documents with the falsified signature, pointing out the mistakes in the handwriting and the timestamp that proved I was nowhere near a computer at that moment. I handed over the photos I had taken during my drive, each one with the location data visible, confirming exactly where I had been. I even showed him the call history and the email timeline from the hospital. The detective looked through each piece of information patiently, and I could tell he was starting to understand the seriousness of what had been done to me. He asked questions about the trip, the timing, and the messages, and I answered everything as clearly as I could. It felt like reliving the whole ordeal again, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted the truth to be recognized. A few days later, the detective contacted me again and asked me to return to the station. When I arrived, he handed me a set of still images taken from the hospital's security cameras. I felt my stomach tighten when I looked at them. The images clearly showed Jessica sitting at a computer inside the hospital, typing and submitting forms. Her face was visible, her hands on the keyboard, and the screen in front of her displayed the exact documents that were later linked to my name. Seeing that made everything painfully real. There was no more guessing, no doubt, no space for excuses. She had done it knowingly, and she hadn't even tried to hide it well. The detective explained that the timestamps on the footage matched the exact time the electronic signature was submitted. Hearing that made me realize just how calculated the whole situation had been. It wasn't something done in a moment of stress or confusion. It was planned, deliberate, and targeted at me. Holding those images in my hands, I felt a mix of anger, relief, and sadness all at once. The confirmation changed everything. I had suspected the truth, but seeing visual proof made it impossible to deny how far Jessica had gone. The detective told me that with the evidence I provided and the footage they retrieved, the case was solid. He said they were already moving forward with the next steps. When I left the station that day, I walked slowly to my car, trying to process everything. I felt tired, not physically, but emotionally drained. Even though the truth was finally clear, it didn't make the betrayal less painful. I thought about all the moments I had trusted Jessica, the messages she sent, and the idea that she wanted me there for the birth. All of it had been part of a plan to use my identity. I sat in the car for a moment, taking a breath and trying to calm myself, because even with the truth out, the situation wasn't over yet. There were still conversations to come, and I knew some of them would be hard. It didn't take long for the consequences to reach David. One afternoon, my phone rang, and when I saw his name, my chest tightened. I answered, and his voice came through filled with panic and disbelief. He had just found out that his wife had been arrested, and he was trying to understand why. He kept asking what was happening, saying he didn't know anything about the accusations. I could hear the desperation in his voice, but I also felt a wall inside myself. I had explained everything to the police, and I didn't feel responsible for how he reacted now. I told him calmly that I had only defended myself, that the evidence was clear, and that nothing had been done without reason. He kept asking how this could be possible, and I reminded him gently about the invitation, the long trip, the rejection at the hospital, and the forged documents. There was a long silence on the line before he spoke again. He sounded lost, like he didn't know how to handle the truth that was now in front of him. Even as he struggled to make sense of it, I stayed firm. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't let myself fall apart. I had already been through the confusion, the pain, and the shock. Now all I cared about was that the truth was finally coming out. I told him that everything I had lived through, the humiliation, the forged documents, the fear, and the betrayal, could no longer be hidden. He didn't argue after that. He only breathed heavily, still trying to understand what had happened inside his own home. When the call ended, I sat quietly, thinking about how far things had gone and how deeply all of this had affected me. Even though it was hard, I felt a sense of relief for the first time. I knew the truth had finally begun to come out of the shadows, and after everything I had lived through, nothing could hide it again. As the investigation continued to move forward, I started learning things about Jessica that I never imagined were possible. At first, I thought everything she had done to me was limited to that one situation with the hospital and the forged documents. I believed it was an isolated betrayal, something cruel but contained. But then the detectives told me they had found more. They explained that I wasn't the only one who had been deceived. Other members of the family had gone through similar situations, and hearing that left me stunned. I sat there listening as they described patterns that repeated in different moments, always involving manipulation, hidden intentions, and financial traps. It felt strange to learn all of this from strangers who had only known me for a short time. They had charts, timelines, and notes showing how the pieces fit together. The more they talked, the more I realized that what happened to me was just one part of something much bigger. I had spent so much time blaming myself for trusting her, but now I understood that she had planned these things with a level of coldness I had never suspected. One morning, I received a call saying that Jessica's lawyer wanted to talk to me. At first, I didn't know what to expect. I wondered if he would try to defend her actions or accuse me of something. But when he arrived, he surprised me. He didn't come to attack me or deny what she had done. Instead, He came with a folder full of documents and a tone that almost sounded tired, as if he had been dealing with this kind of situation for far too long. He told me that before moving forward with anything, there was information I needed to know. Then he explained that Jessica had a criminal past she had kept hidden from everyone. Not only that, but she had even used a different identity in the past, one she had abandoned when it became inconvenient. Hearing that left me speechless. I didn't know whether to feel angry, sad, or simply overwhelmed. I kept thinking about every moment I had interacted with her, trying to see if there had ever been a clue that could have warned me. But there wasn't. She had hidden everything with skill. The lawyer continued explaining the details, showing me records that went back years. He said she had been involved in schemes that targeted people close to her, always using trust as her weapon. The more he talked, the clearer it became that her behavior at the hospital was not sudden or impulsive. It was part of a pattern she had repeated before. I stared at the documents, feeling a mix of shock and disbelief. I remembered how she used to speak to me, always with a calm voice, always acting like she wanted peace in the family. I remembered the moments she smiled at me, the times she pretended to include me, and how she had sent messages that seemed thoughtful. Now all of that felt fake. It wasn't kindness, it was calculation. It dawned on me that she had been slowly building a situation where everyone saw her as trustworthy, while in reality, she was preparing the next person she would deceive. Understanding this made the betrayal even deeper, not just because of what she did to me, but because she had been living a lie right in front of all of us. After everything the lawyer told me, I knew I couldn't hide the truth from my son. He deserved to know exactly who he had been living with. So I called him and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I sat him down and explained everything as clearly as I could. I didn't rush. I didn't exaggerate anything. I just told him what the police had discovered and what the lawyer had revealed. I watched his face change with every detail. At first, he looked confused, as if his mind refused to accept any of it. Then he looked hurt, deeply hurt, in a way that went beyond anything I had felt myself. It was like the ground beneath him was shifting, and he didn't know how to keep his balance. Seeing that expression made something inside me break a little. I had suffered because of her lies, but he had lived beside her every day. The shock for him was greater. I wanted to comfort him, but I also knew that softening the truth would only make everything worse later. As I continued speaking, he stayed silent, staring at the table as if trying to understand how someone he trusted could hide so much. I explained how the investigators had found other victims within the family, how the patterns were the same, and how each discovery made her intentions clearer. He finally raised his head and looked at me, his eyes full of disbelief and pain. I told him I wished I could shield him from this, but the truth couldn't be ignored. The more I talked, the more I realized how heavily this weighed on him. I could see his mind going back through memories, reevaluating moments he once thought were normal. I could almost feel the heartbreak in him, and for a moment I wondered if he blamed himself the way I had blamed myself earlier. I reassured him that none of this was his fault, that Jessica had fooled all of us, but the sadness in his eyes didn't fade. Still, I knew I had done what needed to be done. Even though it hurt him deeply, he deserved to know the truth. Keeping anything hidden would have only protected the lies she had spent years building. As more information surfaced, it became impossible to deny what had been happening. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Jessica had built her entire relationship with us on carefully planned deception. She had created an image of herself that was nothing more than a mask, and now that mask was falling apart, piece by piece, revealing a reality none of us could have imagined. Watching my son struggle with the truth broke my heart, but I understood it was necessary. Each new revelation made it clearer that the life she had shown us was never real. It had all been constructed on lies that were finally collapsing in a way no one could ignore anymore. The trial began by revealing a version of Jessica even darker than anything I had imagined. I walked into the courtroom expecting difficult moments, but nothing prepared me for the amount of information that started coming out in the first hour alone. The prosecutor began by laying out a timeline that went far beyond the incident with the hospital. He described situations from years earlier, each one showing that her actions were not accidental or emotional reactions. As I listened, I felt myself slowly sinking into a chair that suddenly seemed too small for how heavy everything felt. The witnesses were called one by one, and each brought something new, something disturbing, something that made it clear this wasn't a single mistake, but a long-term pattern. The courtroom felt tense, and I could see people shifting uncomfortably as documents were displayed on the screens. I looked over at Jessica a few times, and she sat there expressionless, almost as if none of it had anything to do with her. Watching her like that made me realize how little I had known about her. I had once tried to see her as part of the family, but now I understood how carefully she had built that illusion. As the day continued, the witnesses presented strong evidence, records with her digital traces, old documents linking her to financial manipulation, and reports that showed similar schemes she had been part of long before meeting us. Each detail seemed worse than the one before. The prosecutor read through emails, bank statements, and transaction histories, explaining how her involvement was clear in every chain of events. What shocked me most was how organized everything had been. There were spreadsheets, planned steps, and instructions she had left behind in different accounts. It became obvious she didn't act on impulse. Her decisions were cold and deliberate. I sat there listening, trying to absorb every piece of information while also processing the fact that she had done all of this while pretending to live an ordinary life. I thought about the moments she had sat at our table, smiling, speaking softly, acting as if she cared. Now, seeing the truth behind her actions, those memories felt hollow. They weren't moments of real connection. They were moments she used to hide who she truly was. When the defense finally allowed Jessica to speak, her attempt to explain herself collapsed almost instantly in front of the evidence. She said she was misunderstood, that she had been under pressure, and that some things weren't what they looked like. But her words didn't match the documents, the patterns, or the testimonies. Each time she tried to deny something, the prosecutor pulled up another file or record that showed she had known exactly what she was doing. I watched her struggle to keep control of the situation, but it was impossible. She wasn't facing people she could manipulate. She was facing facts she couldn't twist. I felt an unexpected mix of relief and sadness while watching her try to defend herself. Relief because the truth was finally being exposed. Sadness because I realized how far she had gone to build her lies. Even in that moment, she acted as though everyone else was wrong, refusing to acknowledge the impact of her choices. I looked over at David during her testimony, and the expression on his face was something I will never forget. His skin looked pale, his eyes distant, and he seemed unable to move or react. He kept staring at the floor as if trying to make sense of the person he had shared his home with. I could see the weight of the shame he carried, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he had unknowingly trusted someone living a double life. Watching him struggle hurt me more than anything that had been done to me personally. I knew he was replaying moments in his head, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the person being revealed in court. I wanted to reach out and comfort him, but I also knew he needed time to process everything. This wasn't just my pain anymore. It was his pain too, a deeper one that came from realizing he had been living beside a lie for years. For me, every piece of evidence presented in that courtroom confirmed something I had felt since the first moment I saw the forged signature. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't misunderstood. I hadn't reacted out of emotion or hurt pride. The truth was exactly as serious as I had believed it to be. Hearing each new detail was painful, but it was also necessary. I needed to know the full extent of what had been done and why everything had unfolded the way it did. It didn't erase the betrayal or the fear I felt when everything first happened, but it gave me clarity. Piece by piece, the picture grew clearer, and with it, my own doubts began to fade. I no longer questioned whether I had overreacted or imagined things. The courtroom made sure no one questioned it either. By the end of the proceedings, the narrative Jessica had built over the years was completely torn apart. No amount of excuses or emotional displays could cover the truth anymore. Everything she had carefully constructed, every lie, every false story, every attempt to manipulate the people around her, was falling apart in front of everyone. It was impossible for anyone to deny what she had done, no matter how painful it was to face. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt a deep ache in my chest, but also a strange sense of finality. The truth had come out fully, and there was no going back. The story she had tried to create for herself no longer existed. What remained was the reality that had always been there, one that nobody could ignore now, no matter how much it hurt. The final sentence marked the end of a devastating phase, but it also marked the beginning of a reconstruction that I knew would take time. As I sat in the courtroom listening to the judge speak, my mind replayed everything we had lived through: the betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the endless days of uncertainty. When the sentence was finally announced, I felt something inside me loosen. It wasn't joy, but a kind of relief that allowed me to breathe again. At the same time, sadness washed over me as I thought about how much pain had been caused, how much trust had been broken, and how many moments had been replaced by fear or confusion. Even though justice had been served, the scars didn't disappear in that instant. I looked around the courtroom and saw faces that had watched this entire process unfold. Some looked tired, some troubled, and I understood that we weren't the only ones affected. But for me, it was the first step toward leaving behind a period of suffering that had consumed our lives. When I walked out of the courtroom with David holding Nathan, something inside me shifted. Seeing my son with his child in his arms reminded me of what truly mattered now. David looked exhausted but determined, like someone who had survived something heavy and was finally able to take a breath. Nathan, unaware of everything, rested calmly against his father's chest. That small image felt like a sign of hope after so much turmoil. For a moment, I simply stood still, watching them, realizing how much stronger we were now compared to when all of this began. We had been pushed, tested, and shaken, but we were still standing. The bond between us felt different. Not just the bond between mother and son, but the bond created when two people survive something painful together. I understood then that despite everything Jessica had done, she had not destroyed us. If anything, she had made us more aware of how much we needed each other. As the days passed, I noticed that the security of my grandson and the emotional recovery of my son became my main priorities. I found myself constantly observing Nathan, wanting to make sure he grew up in an environment filled with stability and love, without the shadows that had surrounded the start of his life. I also paid close attention to David. He tried to act strong, but I could see the heaviness he carried. He wasn't only dealing with betrayal, he was also dealing with the shock of realizing how much he had been deceived. Some mornings, he didn't say much, and I didn't push him. I simply stayed near, letting him know he wasn't alone. Little by little, he opened up, talking about memories that now felt tainted and feelings he didn't know how to handle. I listened, knowing that having someone to talk to was part of the healing he needed. I focused on making the house feel safe again, organized, peaceful, and predictable, something that felt stable after months of chaos. That experience changed me deeply. I found strength in moments when I thought I wouldn't get through another day. There were times when fear and doubt tried to overwhelm me, but I kept going because I knew my family needed me. I learned that strength doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from facing reality, even when it hurts. I also realized that I had to let go of the guilt I carried, the guilt of not seeing who Jessica truly was. It wasn't my fault. She had fooled many people, and I was just one of them. Accepting that allowed me to stop blaming myself and instead focus on moving forward. I made a promise that I would not allow anything like this to break us again. My role now wasn't just to heal from what happened, but to make sure our future was built on truth and protection. I knew someone had tried to destroy us, but the attempt had failed. Everything they had planned, all the manipulation, all the harm, they had only revealed the strength we didn't know we had. I often thought back to the moment I arrived at the hospital months earlier, confused and hurt, and compared it to the person I had become after everything unfolded. I was no longer that woman who doubted herself or questioned her worth. I had learned to trust my instincts and to stand firm even when people tried to twist the truth. And as I watched David spending time with Nathan, I realized he too was becoming stronger in his own way. The pain he felt had pushed him to see life differently, to protect his son with a determination I admired. From that day forward, I promised myself I would stay vigilant. I would watch over my family with even more care, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Nothing would threaten my family again, no matter what came. The decisions I made would always be guided by what was best for Nathan and David. I didn't know what challenges might come in the future, but I knew we were prepared. The courtroom, the evidence, the lies, they all belonged to the past now. What mattered was the path ahead, the future we were creating, and the certainty that we would face everything together. And from that day on, nothing would ever come close to tearing us apart again, no matter what tried to come our way. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.